I'm visiting my mother tomorrow.
Do you ever wish that she was dead?
What?
Described by writer and director Ari Aster as a Jewish Lord of the Rings, but he's just going to his mom's house. Beau Wasserman is a 47-year-old, anxiety-ridden man who has spent his entire life under the shadow of his mother, Mona. Mona is an extraordinarily successful businesswoman whose company, MW, manufactures just about everything imaginable, from apartment complexes, GPS, and medication, to razors and frozen dinners. Beau lives alone in a crime-ridden neighborhood in a horribly run-down apartment building. He is going to visit his mother tomorrow, but his apartment keys and bag are stolen just before he leaves. Beau calls his mother to explain that he won't be able to make his flight, and Mona seems confused and ultimately apathetic. Beau then takes his new medication prescribed by his therapist, who instructs him to only take the medication with water. Unfortunately, just at that moment, the water in Beau's building is shut off, and Beau must traverse the crime-ridden streets to get next door to the convenience store for a bottle of water. While he's at the store, the entire population of homeless men and women outside Beau's complex make their way into his apartment, locking him out of the building, and Beau is forced to sleep outside. When he awakes the next morning, his apartment is empty, but it is completely trashed. Beau calls Mona again and learns through a hapless UPS driver that his mother was hit by a fallen chandelier and has been decapitated. After a deranged homeless man falls on top of Beau while he's in the bathtub, Beau runs outside terrified and is simultaneously stabbed by a naked serial killer and hit by a car. The woman who hits him, Grace, takes him to her home, where her husband and Dr. Roger tends to his wounds. Roger and Grace also care for a disturbed man named Jeeves, who was their son's friend when he was in the army before he was killed in action. They also have a daughter, Tony, who immediately hates Beau for stealing her bedroom while he recovers. Beau then calls Dr. Cohen, the family lawyer, who informs him that Mona's will stipulates that she cannot be buried without Beau being present. Roger promises to take Beau to his mother's estate as soon as possible, but insists Beau rest until he's healed. At one point during his stay, Grace slips a note to Beau, warning him to stop incriminating yourself. Tony then forces Beau to take drugs with her, leading to a flashback, where a teenage Beau is with his mother on a cruise ship. He meets and quickly falls in love with a girl named Elaine. The two kiss and swear to remain virgins until they meet again. Beau wakes up back in the house, where Grace tells him to switch the television to channel 78, which reveals Beau as actually being watched on cameras placed throughout the house. Tony then appears and takes Beau to her brother's old room and attempts to force him to paint the walls. When he refuses, she berates Beau before drinking a can of paint, committing suicide. Grace walks in on Beau holding Tony's body and blames him for her death. Grace yells for Jeeves, telling him to rip him apart. Beau runs out of the house and takes off for the nearby forest. He hits his head on a tree branch, and when he wakes, he stumbles upon a young pregnant woman who takes him to a troupe of actors called the Orphans of the Forest. They are about to put on a play, which Beau imagines himself as the protagonist of. A man who spends his entire life searching for his wife and 3 sons after they're separated by a flood. In a flashback, a young Beau is told by Mona that his father was killed by a genetic heart defect the moment that Beau is conceived. Soon after this, while still watching the play, a stranger approaches Beau and informs him that he knew his father and that he's still alive. Unfortunately, the troupe is then ambushed by Jeeves, where he slaughters several actors in the process, and Beau narrowly escapes. Beau hitchhikes the rest of the way home, only to discover that he has just missed his mother's funeral. He wanders around the house, takes a nap, and is awakened to the sounds of a woman entering the house. Beau realizes it's Elaine, the girl that he fell in love with on the cruise. They both make their way to Mona's bedroom, where they have sex. Beau is still terrified that just like his father, he will die during sex. But much to his relief, he survives. Elaine, however, dies on top of him. Mona suddenly appears and reveals that she was not only still alive, but watching Beau the entire time. She berates him, while also revealing that his therapist works for her, having shared their sessions with her all these years. Beau demands to know the truth about his father, and she takes him to the attic, where Beau sees a version of himself chained up and learns that his father is actually a giant, penis-shaped monster. Jeeves breaks into the house and attacks the monster, but the monster kills him. Beau escapes the attic, and after Mona admits that she hates him, Beau strangles her. Beau leaves the estate and makes his way to a nearby beach, where he finds a boat and rides it off into the night. After entering a cave, the motor begins to stall, and he finds himself in an arena filled with people, where he's suddenly put on trial by Mona and Dr. Cohen, Beau's lawyer. On a giant screen, footage of all the times that Beau has wronged or slighted his mother is shown. Beau tries to defend himself, but he soon realizes that his feet are glued to the boat. While the crowd looks on, Beau desperately attempts to persuade Mona, but she responds with only silence. It is then that Beau finally accepts his fate. The boat's motor explodes, capsizing the boat and drowning Beau. The crowd slowly make their way out. All the while, Mona's sobs can be heard echoing throughout the arena. Of course, what actually happens in the film is subject to interpretation. There have been theories that say that the entire film takes place inside Beau's head, that he never even left his apartment, that everything and everyone that Beau encounters is only a result of obsessive rumination and catastrophizing. When the film began, I tried my best to not take anything too literally, theorizing that much of the film was meant to be surreal and nightmarish. So when we would see Beau racing to get into his apartment building while a wild-eyed, tattooed man chased him down, I didn't take that as what was literally happening to Beau. I took it as simply how Beau sees the world, an intensely scary place where his worst possible fears come true around every corner. The point of view through a cripplingly anxious, unreliable narrator. Although there are definitely some elements of Beau's reality that are catastrophized, and some scenes that are completely metaphorical, like the orphans of the forest, the penis monster in the attic, and the entire ending in the cave, the majority of the things that Beau experiences are actually happening to him. Everything that happens to Beau is orchestrated by one person, Mona. In a series of revealing questions, Mona claims she asks herself constantly in her monologue towards the end of the film, "I've been ground down to nothing by love and panic and worries. Is my baby hungry? Is he healthy? Is he scared enough of the world?" Mona's purpose, since Beau was born, is to keep him afraid. The first sequence in the film is fittingly Beau's birth, which we see entirely from his point of view. First, it is completely dark. Then suddenly we hear ear-piercing sounds. A woman screaming. Why isn't he crying? What's wrong with him? While light pours in, the image out of focus and disorienting. Beau remains silent, unbothered. Mona is unshakable in her own truth, insisting that something must be wrong with him. The doctor then slaps him, and only then does Beau begin to cry. This introduction sets up a fundamental dynamic of how Beau will see the world. He believes that there is always something to fear, a perspective shaped entirely by his mother. In reality, there was nothing wrong with him. But it was Mona's insistence that something must be wrong, her hysteria and anxiety that plants the first seed that Beau needs to look at the world as only something to fear. And more importantly, if Beau isn't afraid, that means there is something fundamentally wrong with him. In Mona's mind, she has given Beau everything. Even his birth is viewed in a negative light, somehow a slight against her. She tells him, "Ever since you clawed your way out of me, I've had to dig down deep to my very bottom and squeeze the love out of myself, but still, I gave it to you." Mona is intensely passive-aggressive when she feels slighted. An example of this is her voicemail that she changes only after Beau informs her that he lost his keys. "Leave me a message if you ever want to speak to me again." She is constantly testing Beau by presenting him with choices. Every birthday present given or received, every obstacle placed in front of Beau, every question posed is a choice given to Beau by Mona, designed to determine if he truly loves her. In Mona's eyes, by not choosing her over literally everything else in his life, Beau cannot truly love her. Mona's obsession with choice comes to a head when she goes to utterly insane lengths to determine definitively if Beau loves her by faking her own death. She stages an elaborate funeral, has her lawyer claim that her will states that she can't be buried without Beau present, plasters her death all over her own news stations, and of course, she murders Beau's old nanny Martha to be her body, although Mona claims that Martha volunteered. All of this in order to force Beau into choosing to return home to her. This obsession stemmed from the relationship with Mona's own mother, which she recalls as distant and unloving. My own mother wouldn't even touch me, not to stamp me out if I was on fire. I wasn't worthy of her love. I hadn't earned it, and I never earned it, no matter what I did. Mona is unable to see that she has taken her own deep-rooted fears of being unworthy of her mother's love and projected them onto her own son. She blamed me for everything her mother did to her, and then I had you. I promised I would never do that to him. I will give him all the love I have. Of course, Mona does exactly what she claims she would never do. Because of the lack of affection from her own mother, no matter what Beau does, Mona can never truly accept that Beau loves her. Even when he was a baby, Mona accuses him of rejecting her because he had a hard time breastfeeding. Her projections of rejection are so severe that she takes the normal actions of her days-old son as a slight against her. In Mona's mind, no matter what he does, Beau is an ungrateful child who is always one test away from failing her. Mona took her insecurities and transformed them into an endlessly perpetuated cycle of fear and doubt. Mona constantly changes her demeanor depending on what she needs from Beau. On the phone, excited by the thought that Beau wants her attention and is coming to see her, her voice is filled with kindness. Once Beau appears to not be choosing her, she goes cold or angry. This happens several times in the house at the end of the film. After Mona screams at him for several minutes, Beau slowly turns and starts to walk towards the front door. Only then, scared at the thought of losing his love, does Mona's demeanor change. She fearfully asks, "Why are you walking away? Where are you going?" Once she realizes that Beau isn't going to leave, she turns her anger back on, knowing that she still has him in her grip. After Beau escapes the attic that Mona had just locked him in, he collapses on the floor and is moaning in agony. Mona appears to be comforting him, trying to get him to see why she lied to him. In reality, she's trying to make sure that even after all of that, Beau still loves her. Once Beau starts apologizing profusely, saying he's been a bad son, and even kisses her ankle, Mona immediately goes cold and angry again, saying, "What are you crying about? Do you have any idea what I had to go through to bring you into this world?" Her kindness and concern are only a result of her own fears, a constant game of bait and switch that keeps Beau coming back over and over again to try and prove his love to her. When it's revealed that Beau's therapist Jeremy works for Mona, we hear Beau admit in a recorded session, "When I was just starting to like my own stuff and do my own things, she'd take all those changes very personally and get mad or sad and make me feel bad about it until I stopped," which of course was true, but Mona only sees this admission as a betrayal by Beau, saying, "Over 300 sessions and that's about as flattering to me as they get." Jeremy has been tasked for over 6 years by Mona with only one goal: to get Beau to admit how he truly feels about her. When asked how Beau actually feels about not visiting his mother more frequently, "Are you feeling guilty about that?" Beau says nothing, and the therapist jots down "guilty" on his notepad, a verdict that he is accused of constantly throughout the film. Another pointed question he asks, "Do you ever wish that she was dead?" Which in the context of a therapy session seems appropriate, Jeremy even saying that we are here so we can air these kinds of thoughts. But this is simply another attempt to get Beau to confess. Elaine is a test from the very moment that Mona points her out to Beau on the cruise ship. The test could have even begun before this, perhaps the entire reason Elaine and her mother were on the ship to begin with. The two first meet when Elaine alerts him that there is a dead body in the pool. Later that night, Mona makes Beau choose if she should go to bed early or go out stargazing with him. He doesn't answer immediately, so Mona passive-aggressively says, "I'll go to bed." That's when Beau goes out to meet Elaine, who asks him a series of pointed questions, one of which about his mother. Then soon after, the two share a kiss. After this, Elaine somehow bursts into Beau and Mona's room and erratically claims that she's being taken off the ship, telling Beau, "I love you, wait for me." This is all designed by Mona, so Beau will never take a lover other than Elaine. The test comes full circle when she appears in the fake death news segment on TV, revealing that she is an employee of Mona's, and so Beau will realize that this is indeed the same girl he met on the cruise ship when he was a boy. Elaine then coincidentally happens to mix up the time of the funeral and shows up at the house where Beau will be all alone. Then, soon after, seducing him in Mona's bed. Once again, Beau chooses someone else over Mona, and choosing to have sex with Elaine immediately after his mother's funeral. When Beau looks at his mother's collage of employees, Roger's picture can clearly be seen making up just one of the hundreds of people employed by Mona. Hence his question, "Feeling sad about going home, Beau?" This is another question from Mona, yet again trying to decipher if Beau loves her or is distraught over her death. This also explains Roger's phrasing and choice that he gives Beau. If leaving tomorrow morning isn't good enough, they could leave tonight. To which again, Beau says nothing, which was the same phrasing as Mona's choice to Beau on the boat, and the same phrasing as the therapist asking Beau if he feels guilty about not visiting his mother more often. Grace, on the other hand, seems to have legitimate compassion for Beau. She's not employed by Mona and feels genuinely bad for him. After Beau is presented with the choice to leave for his mom's house today or tomorrow, Grace leaves him the note, "Stop incriminating yourself," alluding to yet another time that Beau is guilty of not truly loving his mother because of his hesitation to make a choice. Beau, of course, didn't realize that, once again, Mona was watching and listening to everything. Since Grace's son was killed in active duty, she's been trying to help as many people as she can. The homeless people outside Beau's apartment, Jeeves, her son's disturbed war buddy, and now Beau, who she treats like a surrogate son, although she seems to be neglecting her actual child, Tony, in the process. While Tony is not an employee of Mona's, her death and the events leading up to it do play into the themes of Mona's tests. Instead of definitively saying yes or no to Tony's bizarre requests, which include drinking a can of paint with her, Beau again refuses to make a choice. Tony tells Beau, "You've already blown it. You failed her stupid test." He tries to get her to explain what she meant by what she said, but Tony drinks the can of paint, killing herself. When Grace stumbles upon Beau trying to revive Tony, she immediately jumps to the conclusion that Beau must have killed her. As good-natured and helpful as Grace is, she proves incapable of seeing the damage that she and Roger have done to Tony by spending all of their time helping everyone else that they can, all the while ignoring their own child constantly. Instead of looking inward and seeing the consequences of her own neglect, Grace throws Beau against a wall, calls him a demon, and 6 Jeeves on him. This is the only time that Mona's literal gaze isn't present in Beau's journey. Beau has escaped Roger and Grace's home and hits his head on a tree branch. Suddenly, Beau stumbles upon Penelope, a kind pregnant woman in the forest, who leads him to a troupe of actors who are about to put on a play. The play itself is about a man who has lost both his father and mother and is feeling alone in the world. When he tries to move on from the grief, he realizes that he is chained to their gravestones. Once he breaks the chain, the man becomes Beau, and he walks thousands of miles to settle in a village and start a new life. He gets a job that he loves, buys a house, and makes lots of friends. He meets a woman who sees his fears, pain, dreams, and potential. They get married and have 3 sons together. But soon a flood comes and destroys his home, separating him from his family. Through many misfortunes and tribulations, he spends his entire life searching for them. Although Beau isn't literally being watched by his mother here, her influence is still present throughout the play. Mona acts as essentially the narrator of Beau's odyssey. After the flood, the narrator describes coming across a village in which he is arrested for a crime that he didn't commit, yet even he will start to have doubts if he is guilty of the crime or not. Once he escapes, an attack dog is sent to find him, who will tear through the world to find him, the dog being Jeeves. As an old man, at the end of his life, Beau lies crying on the ground, and the narrator tells him that you are also being searched for, but you were so lost in your selfishness that no one could ever find you. Then she tells Beau to confess before his peers, to which Beau asks, "But what did I do?" To which the narrator simply says, "You know, confess." Finally, Beau says that he is a coward. After this confession, he is given fresh water, he is able to sleep, and he ends up back in his village. Beau is given a choice to either spend his last dollar on soup or to see a special play being put on by the villagers for one night only. There he finds on the stage the narrator telling Beau's story to his own 3 sons. As the narrator recounts the story of Beau entering the play and finding his children, Beau shouts out and is reunited with his sons. He breaks down, telling them how much he loves them and how long he searched for them. The sons tell Beau that their mother was taken by the flood and they were raised as orphans. All the while, the narrator looks on. The children ask if they have any other family that's still alive, to which then we see a flashback of Mona explaining to a young Beau that his father was killed at the moment of his conception due to a hereditary heart condition. This is where the first seed was placed, that Beau could never be intimate with anyone, otherwise he would be killed, just like his father. Beau explains to his sons that their grandfather is also dead, and the reason that he has never been intimate with anyone. One of his sons then asks, "Then how did you have us?" Beau is suddenly back in the audience of the play, realizing that none of that had happened. This chapter is all about freedom, creativity, and exploring the life that might have been possible for Beau if he wasn't under the constant scrutiny of his mother. Once he breaks himself free from the chains and fears that bind him to Mona, he is free to explore the world and traverse his own path in life. He falls in love and starts a family. The narrator, who I believe to be Mona's voice in the back of Beau's mind, instilling doubt about his choice to free himself from his grief, says that as a consequence of this freedom, his happiness will be short-lived, that he will spend his entire life searching for his family. He will get into increasingly perilous situations, including being accused of murder, and that he will be hunted endlessly. It's only after the narrator prompts Beau to confess to his peers that he's a coward that he's finally able to be at peace. Other than when he was a baby, this is the only time in the film that we see Beau cry, which he actually does twice. Once when he realizes that he's completely alone and his whole life was wasted, which echoes his real life, and a second time when he's reunited with his children, who he embraces lovingly, a sharp contrast to how his mother greets him hours later. Although he's only ever experienced an overabundance of coldness and fear from his own parent, in this fantasy, Beau is a kind and loving parent, one whose life pursuit is to get back to his children, to let them know that they aren't alone and that they are loved. This is also the only time on Beau's journey that he's at legitimate risk of not actually following through on going to his mother's house. He meets a myriad of different people who he identifies with, including a beautiful young woman, as well as a stranger who may or may not be his father. Through all of this, Beau is finally able to envision a future where he isn't under Mona's constant scrutiny. The endless pursuit of Jeeves, unfortunately, literally and figuratively, blows that all up. Beau has a reoccurring dream of his mother taking a boy into an attic and locking him there, while Beau watches from a bathtub. In one of his sessions, Beau tells Jeremy, "There's another me who's identical, but he's braver. He asked her about my father because I'm too scared, and then she sends him away and locks him up. When confronted by Mona and Jeremy while at his mother's house, Beau finally demands to know the truth about his father. Mona takes him to the attic, claiming that she would be right behind him. Then she screams that his dreams of this place were actually memories, before locking him up there. In the darkness, Beau sees a disheveled man in children's clothes chained up, begging for food. Then Beau hears a distorted voice calling out for him, which turns out to be a giant penis-shaped monster. The attic essentially acts as the part of Beau that has been repressed or hidden away since he was a boy. The man chained up could be interpreted in a couple different ways. In Beau's memory, Mona accuses a boy of trying to hurt her by asking her about his father. When he responds that he doesn't care, that's when Mona takes him to the attic, claiming that if he's big enough to hurt her, he's big enough to go in the attic. Approaching this from a literal sense, that could be Beau's twin brother, left abandoned by Mona in the attic all these years. Or he simply represents a part of Beau that has been locked away since he was a child. This being the part of Beau that Mona could not control and manipulate. The part of Beau that was free-thinking and dared to be inquisitive about his father, and in Mona's eyes, is ungrateful of her love. Beau's father, being represented by a penis-shaped monster, is an amalgamation of Beau's lifelong fears about sex, and that the only insight Beau has ever given about his father was the story told by Mona that he was killed at the moment of Beau's conception. Beau has never even seen a clear picture of what his father looked like. By imprisoning the memory of his father in the attic, this is the only way that Mona can deal with the potential influences on Beau that she can't control. When Jeeves finally finds Beau and crashes into the attic, he represents a lingering yet inevitable dread that has been pursuing Beau all his life. In the play put on by the Orphans of the Forest, Jeeves is clearly meant to parallel the attack dog set loose on Beau that will tear through the world to find him. The narrator says, "You will not know this, but you will sense it." When Beau escapes Grace and Roger's house, Jeeves is told by Grace specifically to rip him apart. So when Jeeves finds Beau in the attic, he seemingly ignores Beau, goes right for his father, and begins to tear into him with a combat knife before the monster finally defends itself and kills Jeeves. This acts as a continuation of what Jeeves does to the stranger who approaches Beau in the forest, claiming that his father is still alive. Beau realizes that this man is actually his father, and when Jeeves tracks down Beau minutes later, he detonates a bomb which violently rips his father apart. By destroying these physical representations of Beau's father, Jeeves is doing exactly what Grace told him to do, trying to rip apart the part of Beau that is most like his father, the part of him that is brave, free-thinking, and disloyal. Tearing apart the memory of Beau's father is exactly what Mona has been trying to do since Beau was born. Beau believes that his father was killed when he was conceived. While we don't know what actually caused his death, or if he is even dead at all, he still represents a threat to Mona and a potential siphon to Beau's love. Mona convinces him that his father was killed by a genetic heart defect, one that was passed down to him by his own father, and therefore Beau believes that his condition has been passed down to him. In reality, Beau's father is either still alive, leaving Mona when Beau was very young, or he died of unrelated circumstances. Either way, Mona uses this as a lifelong opportunity to keep Beau terrified of having sex, and more importantly, keep him from being romantically involved with anyone, so Beau never chooses anyone over her. This also results in Beau's testicles becoming, as Roger puts it, significantly distended, since, out of the crippling fear instilled by Mona, he has never had an orgasm in his life. It's also probably not a coincidence that the two forces that clash in the attic are both represented by hyper-masculine archetypes. One is a hulking soldier, fueled only by violence and vengeance, and the other is a literal penis. Beau gets an accidental glimpse into the future when he discovers that Channel 78 on Grace and Roger's TV is actually security camera footage of Beau throughout its journey. While looking at the footage, he accidentally fast-forwards and somehow sees events that have not yet occurred. Eventually, all the images we see will come to pass. These images are Tony coming into the room with a paint can, Beau on the side of the road emerging from the forest, Beau showing up to his mom's house, Beau sitting, looking down over his mother's casket, and overhead footage looking down at Beau in the boat. All moments when Beau is within Mona's gaze. What's interesting here is that Beau gets a short glimpse into events that were not yet written, and he still decides to continue forward, regardless of knowing the outcome. Although the images are brief, he still lives each moment out exactly as he saw it. And although Beau couldn't know exactly where everything was going, those images came to pass only because Beau chose to continue on and ultimately live them out. What's even more interesting is that Beau is not the only person to see the future on Channel 78. Grace comes into the room after Beau has left with Tony and sees the frozen image of the very last shot of the film, the empty arena in the cave, which is actually further into the future than Beau is able to see before being interrupted by Tony. The last thing Beau sees is himself on the boat, so perhaps that's why he chose to get on it. He thought it would lead to his salvation. Beau has no idea what's coming next. Beau takes in the calm of the sea, feeling momentarily free of a crushing weight that has bore down on him since he was born. He then makes his way into an opening of a cave, and of course, the guilt that has forever been inescapable for him finally finds him. Every decision, everything said and unsaid, Beau's entire life has led him to this moment in the cave, and here he is put on trial for all of it. This was never a trial to determine whether he is guilty or not. The answer to that has long been determined through the eyes of Mona. As Dr. Cohen says, the point of this trial is to assess the extent of the subject's guilt. The arena is populated with everyone from Beau's life, from his therapist to strangers, some who seem genuinely entertained, others who seem nonplussed. Dr. Cohen bellows down from his perch, with Mona by his side. Beau has a defense attorney, but he has no microphone, and his voice can barely be heard from across the arena. Beau's first crime is that he loves animals, and enjoys something as innocent as feeding ducks at a local pond before his therapy sessions, or as Dr. Cohen categorizes them, his weekly sessions to scapegoat his mother. He would also feed his therapist fish before his appointments. This bizarre crime is then compared to his fear of the beggars outside his apartment. Dr. Cohen claims that Beau will go out of his way to feed animals, but not feed a, quote, suffering member of society. The wild-eyed man who chases Beau into his apartment is then shown, a man who seconds before he sees Beau was given a cup of soup by Grace, and when he takes it, he immediately throws it down, screaming that it's too hot. Cohen's next exhibit is when Beau was 9 years old. He got lost in a mall while Mona searched desperately for him. During her search, Mona trips and falls, injuring her knee. This is something that Mona never forgave Beau for. Beau's defense attorney claims that Beau was genuinely lost, and once he found a frantic Mona, he was afraid to make himself known for fear of being punished by her. This acts as a microcosm of Beau and Mona's entire relationship. Beau strays away from Mona's gaze, and Mona panics, fearing the worst. Mona perceives Beau's actions as a slight against her, and indirectly causes Mona harm. Also, Mona sees that by Beau choosing to remain silent instead of speaking up, he could have prevented Mona from harm. Mona views this choice by her son as abandonment and betrayal, and never forgives him, a perception that permeates throughout their relationship. When Beau is 15, a group of boys come over to his house. They end up rifling through Mona's underwear. Beau's only defense here is that the boys pressured him constantly. It's after this that Beau's defense attorney is thrown violently to his death. Dr. Cohen then brings up the choice that Roger had given Beau, saying that they could drive to his mother's tonight if tomorrow isn't quick enough, to which Beau claims he didn't want to put him out due to the surgeries that Roger had scheduled. Cohen then moves on to the ceramic statue that Beau had purchased for Mona. Beau decides, in a moment of kindness, to give the statue to Penelope, the woman in the forest. This final piece of evidence is what sends Mona over the edge. The fact that Beau would dare to show kindness and affection to anyone other than her is too much for her to bear, especially the fact that the statue was originally intended for Mona. The trumpets of guilt then sound out throughout the arena, and from that moment on, Beau's fate is sealed. Beau desperately tries to plead his innocence, but no one is listening. He begins to scream and cry for help, realizing that his feet are now somehow glued to the boat. Mona looks on coldly. Beau looks around and realizes what is about to happen. A look of calm comes across his face. Beau has been afraid his entire life, but in his last moments, he finally finds his bravery. Beau has an interesting relationship with water throughout the film. He appears to view it as comforting and safe. From the duck pond he visits, to the water bottle he clutches, to the baths that he enjoys taking. This seems to be an association he made when he was a boy, preferring to stay in the bathtub where it's safe, as opposed to being sent into the unknown of the attic. The irony here being that one of the only things that Beau is comforted by in the world will ultimately kill him. We, the audience, are also incorporated into Beau's final moments, as we too have become witnesses to Beau's life, another silent judger to Beau's choices and fears. After Beau's judgment is rendered, and his capsized boat lays still in the water, Aster lets the credits roll as Beau's audience walks both out of the arena and out of the auditorium, illuminated by the light of the projector coming from behind us in reality and shining dead center straight towards us in the film. Before the first frame of the film begins, Mona's company name, MW, can be seen among the opening logos, which acts as both a literal and figurative statement. Literally, Mona has produced Beau, and figuratively, she, as a result of her influence, has produced his experiences throughout his life and throughout the film. Beau is Afraid opened in theaters domestically on April 21st, which also happens to be the birthday of the actress who played Mona, Patti LuPone. Whether or not that's a coincidence is up to interpretation, but given the themes of the film, that detail hardly seems accidental, meaning in another meta move, Aster intended Mona to influence the release of the film itself. While Beau is at his mother's house, there are a total of 3 songs that play, all of which act as a running commentary by Mona. The song playing at her funeral, Mona's favorite song, is Everything I Own by Bread. The lyrics reflect Mona's warped sense of love, and more importantly, her justification for everything she does to Beau throughout the film, also representing the guilt that Mona desperately hopes that Beau's feeling at her funeral. Quote, "You gave my life to me. I would give anything I own. Give up my life, my heart, my home. Is there someone you know? You're loving them so, but taking them all for granted? You may lose them one day. Someone takes them away, and they don't hear the words you long to say." The song that happens to play immediately when Elaine first arrives late for Mona's funeral is Isn't It a Pity by Nina Simone, clearly intended to be Mona feeling heartbroken and devastated if Beau were to choose Elaine over her. Quote, "Isn't it a pity how we break each other's hearts and cause each other pain? How we take each other's love, forgetting to give back. If Beau were to choose Elaine, in Mona's eyes, he would be selfish and inconsiderate." Then there's Always Be My Baby by Mariah Carey. Although Elaine chooses the song while her and Beau are having sex, of course, it's Mona who actually wants Beau to hear these lyrics. Quote, "You'll always be a part of me. No way you're ever gonna shake me. Boy, don't you know you can't escape me." When Beau is walking down his mother's spiral staircase, a framed picture of Beau can be seen on the wall, taken from a bird's eye view when he was on the phone with the UPS man who discovered Mona's body. Mona was constantly observing Beau through security cameras installed in his apartment. She was always watching. Since Mona owns the apartment complex and convenience store next to it, it's fair to assume that everything that happens in that environment is actually by her design. Given the state of Beau's apartment complex, his entire home might be designed to be unwelcoming and unsafe, making him want to come home to be with Mona. The brown recluse spiders in Beau's apartment are another attempt to make his apartment feel unsafe and undesirable, to push Beau to choose to actually follow through on his promise and visit his mother's house. When Beau calls Mona to tell her that he can't make his flight, 2 things are immediately shut off: his water and his credit card. both of which are consequences for slighting Mona. Shutting the water off in the building forces Beau to desperately venture out to the convenience store, while shutting his credit card off ensures that Beau will need Mona's attention and love in order to get it turned back on. It will also make the trek to Mona's planned funeral that much more chaotic, challenging, and most importantly, by not being able to purchase a flight, it will ensure that Beau will need to rely on Mona's own employees to get to his destination, keeping him within his mother's gaze the entire time. The news channel that Beau watches is owned by Mona's company, and produces a constant series of events that are meant to keep Beau petrified of the world. Among the many employees in Mona's collage, we can see several images of the homeless people terrorizing Beau outside his apartment complex. They too are part of Beau's constant test, designed to keep him in fear of venturing outside and enjoying his life. Every time he comes to and from his apartment, it's a race against potential harm or death, which finally crescendos in them raiding his apartment, occurring only after he tells Mona he won't be able to come and see her, another consequence of Beau's perceived slights against her. On the cruise ship when he was a boy, Mona hears Beau claim that there are two other people besides Mona that he loves in his life, Elaine and Martha, his nanny. Elaine he loves romantically, and Martha platonically. Both of them end up dead as part of Mona's tests for Beau, a fitting sentiment from Mona, who was so utterly insecure that she couldn't handle the idea that Beau could love anyone else but her. And of course, there's the incident that sets this whole odyssey off, someone stealing Beau's apartment keys and suitcase. I believe that too was also Mona, forcing Beau to prove his love to her by showing her that he would fulfill his promise and come to her no matter what obstacles were put in front of him. Since that was her apartment complex, and she was watching at all times, she simply had the maintenance man swipe them while Beau was distracted. When Beau asks if he'd seen his bag and keys, the maintenance man smugly responds, "You're fucked, pal." Another way of saying guilty, a judgment passed down to him by his mother and everyone that works for her. Although Beau's sense of reality seems warped, it is only a repercussion of Mona's own reality, which has been twisted by decades of fear and doubt, constantly seeing the worst in her son and the world. Mona desperately wanted a child, but she had no idea how to raise him. Mona used Beau only as a way to validate her own fears and worries. By doing so, he stayed her little boy and never truly grew up. Mona completely lacks the self-awareness to realize that it was her own deep-rooted fears that made her parent Beau with a constant fear of abandonment, petrified that Beau will turn on her at any moment. By keeping Beau afraid, Mona was able to justify her own perspective of the world. She was able to rationalize her insanely overbearing behavior into merely a state of protection for Beau, when in reality, it's only a defense mechanism born out of her defunct relationship with her own mother, never truly believing that she is capable of being loved, no matter what she does. This cycle of fear and doubt ends up being a self-fulfilling prophecy, pushing Beau away from her due to the immense guilt that he's forced to endure simply by being her son. Beau is never able to prove that he loves her. Everything he does somehow misinterpreted as an act of betrayal and ungratefulness, constantly feeding into Mona's paranoia, justifying its own existence in the process. Mona's purpose, since her son was born, is to keep Beau afraid of the world and all its many dangers that lurk around every corner. To have someone that she could shape into loving her unconditionally, but ultimately, that was an impossible task. Mona's insecurities and fears created this cycle, and they were never going to allow her to believe that Beau could ever truly love her. In the end, Beau was afraid, but only because Mona was terrified.